Measuring Success Right, the official podcast of the Marriott Student Review, a podcast for students by students, where we connect the leaders of tomorrow with the issues of today.
The truth is, I think that finding our purpose is never a one-time event. I think it's literally the work of our lives. We do it over and over and over again.
Welcome to a new episode of Measuring Success Right. My name is Hunter Muse, and I'll be hosting today. I'm currently an information systems student at BYU, and we are so thrilled to be welcoming our guest today, Amy Antonelli. Amy, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
We're so glad to have you join the show. I've been looking forward to this for a while now, and so I'm so excited you could make it down to Provo and be with us.
Oh, well, it's just an honor to be here, and the feeling is very mutual. I'm excited to see you too, Hunter.
Well, we'll get started. Just in case our listeners don't know, Amy, I'll just kind of read your bio, background, and we'll jump in. So Amy, as the first executive director of Rising Star Outreach, Amy spent 7 years working in rural India, helping those afflicted with leprosy. Prior to her work in India, Amy acted as a spokesperson for Apple's executive officers, including CEO Steve Jobs, and was instrumental in building PowerSchool Inc., leading up to its acquisition by Apple in 2002. In 2014, she led an initiative with the leadership at Facebook to develop a more mission-driven community, and another initiative with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to develop a global self-reliance mentoring strategy. In 2016, she became the CEO of Deseret Network International, the parent organization of Humanitarian Experience for Youth, aka HEFY, Youth Summit Jerusalem, and the Youth Refugee Coalition, a Center for Social Innovation Fellow at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Amy received a BA from BYU and a master's degree from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She also served as a missionary in Italy and Malta. Amy is a one-time marathon runner, love that, a calligrapher, an explorer of ideas, and the author of the blog Kadalmangalam Road. Did I say that right?
You did. That was amazing.
Oh, wow. First time.
Yeah, impressive.
Okay. Amy considers Palo Alto, California home, where she can be found hiking the Stanford Hills with her friends and family. Amy, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. It's fun to be back at BYU.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit. Well, I guess we'll get started. Just telling us a little bit about our listeners who may not know HEFY, the mission, what it is, what it's trying to do. Could you kind of give us a background?
Sure. Yeah, totally. So HEFY is actually 20 years old. It was a nonprofit that never started out to be a nonprofit. Originally, 20 years ago, there was a dad who wanted his son to be able to go on, Christian organizations a lot have these things called mission trips. Yeah. So he wanted his son to be able to do one of these mission trips. He felt like his son was kind of in a place where his priorities weren't 100%, aligned with what they should be, and he felt like maybe going and serving other people might help to give him a new perspective. Mm-hmm. And so he looked around. He wanted to do something with people of our faith, and he couldn't really find anything that existed at that point. And so he just decided to take his son to Brazil, where he served his mission. And they found an organization of street kids and worked with them. And it was life-changing for this kid. It really turned him around in terms of what he thought was important and what he wanted to do. And so they came back, and all of their friends noticed that this change had happened. And of course, all of the parents said, well, you have to take our kids next year. And so it just kind of started to grow that way. And it was this organic, really neat thing that just kind of happened because a lot of parents were willing to do a lot of hard work to give their kids this experience. And then, it just kind of got to the point where it just got too big for the Binghams. Their names were Glenn and Elizabeth Bingham. It got too big for them to run by themselves, and so they hired somebody to run it, and then it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And 4 years ago, they felt like it had gotten to the point where it was really ready to scale. And so they asked me to come in as CEO and just see what we could do to build it out. And so that's what we've been doing. We've grown in the last few years by 312%.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's been incredible. We've got about 4,000 kids going out on trips this summer to 36 global locations around the world. And it's just incredible to see the impact that it has on these kids who are already, this generation of kids that are the most incredible that have ever been sent to Earth, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They have this unbelievable capacity to love without judgment, and it's something that I think our world has never seen before. And they insist on it. They just insist on loving people, no matter who they are, what background they're coming from.
Yeah.
And they take that love and they go out into rural Africa or, rural Cambodia or sometimes, in the South Pacific or South America or just all of these places all over the world. And all they do essentially is export love.
Yeah.
I mean, our projects are sustainable. We work really hard to make sure that we maximize the good and mitigate the harm. We're proud of the projects that we do. None of our projects are just fake projects to give kids some kind of experience. We're very against volunteerism.
Right.
But the real magic of HEFY is that these kids serve in ways that they've never served before, and they come to know Christ in the process. And it's just, it's really amazing.
Yeah. It's an incredible mission. And I love how, these days it's so common to hear people be like so pessimistic about this upcoming generation. Like, oh, they so irresponsible and they don't know how to work and da-da-da. But I love the way you described really the true nature of the trip leaders and the participants going out and how they're fulfilling that mission.
You think about it, not to get too spiritual on you or whatever.
No, we're BYU, please.
But seriously, you think about it, like our prophet couldn't be more clear about where we're at right now in terms of the history of the world. And I think that our adversary has never been stronger, never been more capable of tricking these kids based on nuanced right and wrong, questions.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't know. I've thought about this a lot, and I just think, if I were in charge of the world and I knew that this was the point in time when my enemy was going to be the very strongest, the very most cunning that he's ever been, I'm saving the best of the best for right now. The kids that are capable of doing this, and they understand their responsibility, and these kids are them. They're amazing.
Wow.
They knock my socks off.
That's so incredible. I love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah.
What do you feel like has been the key to that incredible growth over the last 3 years? Like, what did you do coming in? What do you feel like was some of the key factors?
I think I got pretty lucky in the sense of a lot of times I think when people come in and take over an organization with the intention of scaling it, they find that there's a lot of cleanup work that has to be done first. I didn't. The people that had run HEFY before me were just remarkable managers and leaders and had given us a foundation that was incredibly easy to build on. Like HEFY is 100% self-reliant, so we don't take outside donations. We're completely self-funded, and that helps a lot because I get to spend 100% of my time focusing on our programs. Yeah. I think that the other thing that we've tried to do over the years is we run this nonprofit like a business. So we're very data driven. We operate according to metrics, and we look at the product that we produced a lot like you would look at if you were running a for-profit business. And if it performs according to a certain level of expectation that we have, which essentially is world class, then we keep it. And if it doesn't, then we jettison it.
Right.
And you have to kind of meet a certain standard to be, for it to be considered HEFY quality.
Sure.
And I'm proud of that. I think our organization has done a great job of really producing something that people can be proud of.
Yeah. And one other thing you mentioned before we started the show was you're talking about the importance of the trip leaders and creating that experience for your participants.
Yeah.
And I have to be full disclosure, I was trip leader.
We only hire the best of the best.
Oh, please. No, I was a trip leader in 2018, so last year, in Brazil. And it was an incredible experience. We could talk about this for a long time. I won't go into the details of it, but it was both, I felt like I was contributing to the community and also had amazing experiences with each of the teenagers, the participants I was able to spend time with. It was remarkable. And our audience is mainly, we have a lot of people who are in the age range of potential trip leaders.
Oh, cool.
So if they were interested in getting involved, what would you say, like, they should look to do, or who are you looking for?
Yeah, no, for sure. I actually love that, especially if they're BYU students. I think that HEFY has kind of reached that, I don't know, nebulous X factor of cool factor. So we're getting a huge amount of applications these days. But I mean, I think we'll probably have 1,500 applications by the time we finish this round for 2020, and we're going to hire about 90 people out of that. Whoa. So I'm just saying that because for me, the greatest challenge that we have with all this growth is making sure that we maintain that level of quality, and that starts and ends with our trip leaders. So if you're interested in being a trip leader, just go ahead and go straight to our website. It's hefy.org, and just apply to be a trip leader. We'd love to see you. And our applications close February 1st. I really love that BYU students are listening to this. I think that we get a huge number of our trip leaders from BYU, Harvard, Stanford. We get excellent trip leaders, but they come from rigorous programs where they're used to doing really hard things at the same time that they're building testimonies and, facilitating miracles.
Yeah. That's true. And I encourage anyone who's really passionate to get involved, and it was life-changing for me. So thank you for sharing about that.
Well, you had a huge impact, Hunter.
Yeah,
I'm glad you were part of it.
It was fun. It was wonderful. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. I don't know how often you talk about this, but you had, a fascinating career before you joined HEFY. Like all these. I mean, I read your bio, like Steve Jobs, Facebook and India and all these different things. How have you approached those different job changes? What has been your philosophy in having this kind of like high impact, fascinating career that you've had?
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting question, actually, to kind of summarize. I think, looking back on when I was working at BYU here as a student and kind of envisioning what my life would look like, I really was very clear that by this time in my life, when I'm 45 years old, I would, have a minivan and like 6 kids and like Cheerios smushed in the backseat. And I was super clear, and I was like thrilled with that. I really wanted that to be my life, and I loved the idea of being a mother, and I was excited about that. And then I started to, the more I started to kind of get to know God, and the more that I started to understand that He really knows me, the more I started to listen to Him and to feel like maybe there was something other than what I thought my future would be that He had in mind. Yeah. So, I started out at BYU with the whole plan, went on a mission, came home, actually got engaged. Yeah, really excited to get married. And the closer I got to my wedding, the more I just started to feel wrong about it. The whole thing just felt off and wrong. And so 4 weeks before we were supposed to get married, we called off the wedding, and I gave the ring back and sort of looked around to see what my life would look like after that. And not very long after that, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who had moved to California while I was on my mission. And he called and said, "Hey, while you were on your mission, this thing came out. I think it's going to be really big. It's called the internet. I really think this thing's going to take off." I'm like, okay, well, tell me all about it. It was like mind-blowing at the time that, this real-time thing. You could write an email and somebody could see it the next second. It was just like, it's hard for this generation to comprehend how incredibly life-changing that was for us, But anyway, convinced me, and so I moved to California, and it was the whole startup story. We rented an apartment and sat on the floor and came up with ideas for business plans, and I traveled around the country and told people about the internet. It was a really, really fun, exciting time. And then a couple of years later, Steve Jobs walked into our office one day and and purchased our company. And I was so young and dumb. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was trying to follow the Spirit. And I really loved the people that had started this company and invited me to join them with it.
Right.
so I just kind of took a chance without knowing what was next. And it turned out what was next for me was just this incredible opportunity to meet Steve Jobs and to get to watch him bring Apple back at a time when Apple was not the Apple that you know right now.
Right.
Like back then, Apple was like in schools. I mean, it was this thing that people used, with these computers in people's classrooms, and nobody actually had an Apple. Only the coolest people in the world had like real Apples.
Yeah.
But man, he was convinced that we were about to change the world. Like that guy, you couldn't walk into a room with him without walking out of it just being like, okay, we need to brace ourselves because we're about to blow the world apart. And he was right. It was contagious. He had this ability to make every single person around him feel like they were a part of something magnificent and enormous. And I think that one of the greatest blessings of my life actually has been to just get to be in his presence during that time, and to watch the impact that he was able to make just because he believed it was going to happen. I mean, he knew it. He knew exactly what was going to happen, and he was right.
Wow.
So
what was it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is just I read his bio. Like I've always been really interested in Steve Jobs. What do you feel like lessons you learned? Because what you just described about him, I mean, you were the CEO, I was a trip leader. I felt the same way when you were describing like the mission of HEFY. Like when I was around you. No, I'm serious. Like you'd have that same sort of contagious enthusiasm for the mission.
Yeah.
What do you feel like factors into that? Like how did he do it? Or like, I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, totally. I actually feel like that's one of the greatest skills that a person can learn. And I didn't know it when I was learning it. But what Steve taught me was how to engage people around a common cause. I mean, you could go into a meeting with that guy about hard drives and come out just feeling like the most inspired person in the world.
Yeah.
But he wasn't talking about hard drives. He was talking about how, like, we're going to change the world with this box.
Yeah.
And I think that because he believed it so deeply and he was so committed to it and he saw the whole vision of what it could be, and he was very good at articulating it, that we were able to catch the vision. And so I think the more that I am around people like that and the more that I watch really great leaders and how they're able to engage people around a common cause, the more I try to pick up on like the nuances of how they do that, the way that they emphasize words, the way that they're able to like paint a picture that makes you feel not only like I have a vision, but that you could be part of my vision, and actually it's not going to happen unless you join me, And so, you know what I'm saying? Like it can't just be like, this is my vision. It has to be like, hey, come, let's do this together and we'll create this thing together.
So it's not just knowing the vision, but being able to include others in that vision.
Absolutely. It can't be like, you come join me and let's build my vision together. It has to be like, Hunter, I need you to contribute. And if you don't, it's just not going to be the same thing.
Right.
That's what he did with the whole, you make a difference. Like Apple was so genius at like, you figure out what makes you different and then you change the world with it. So.
Wow. That is
Sorry,
so
I talk a lot with my hands. I'm Italian. You're going to hear noises, me bumping into the microphone.
No, that's amazing. And I know a little bit about this story, but I know after a few years at Apple, you have this amazing career. You're in Palo Alto during like the boom.
Yeah.
I mean, like this is like serious foundational time in Silicon Valley. So much potential, and you get like, tell me that story. Where you moved to India and like what happens there?
No, totally.
Like, tell me about that.
Well, so I mean, I kind of told you the beginning of my story, right? I was very sure that I wanted to be a mother, and I have this like deep inherent desire to be a mother, right? I feel like that's such a gift that I've been blessed with, and I'm really so excited that that's still something I get to do, even along with all this like adventuring and amazing life I've gotten to lead in the meantime, but. I had gotten to a point in Palo Alto where, I mean, Hunter, we were at like the epicenter of a hurricane. Like Silicon Valley at that point it's hard to describe it. you could be down on University Avenues and these vans would pull up and the back doors of the vans would swing open and then people would just be like throwing out T-shirts and swag and like all this. They were just like throwing money at us. If we said internet, they were throwing money at us. Wow. And it was just this like crazy, it was the bubble, you know, that they talk about.
Yeah.
This is an insane time and it was really wild and really exciting and really fun. And I drove a little white convertible and I was like so awesome. I sort of felt like there was, you know, really nothing in the world that apart from, you know, that I could want, apart from this sort of deep, unfulfilled desire that I had to nurture and love and take care of people that I didn't feel like was being met. And the faster that my career at Apple started to take off, the more I started to feel like I was like on a train that was kind of going really fast in a direction that I didn't want to go in. And so it started to cause some depression. I was feeling like I had two options in life. One was to be a hard-nosed, super tough career woman, or the other option was to be a mother, and I didn't have that option. And so I was just depressed because I couldn't see a third way. But here's the cool thing. God always has a third way.
Yeah.
Like, I think recipe for depression is thinking there's no other way, and he always has another way for you because he knows you best. And so 2004, the tsunami hit India. I had a mentor who has Dick Peary, who's been a huge influence in my life. His family has a foundation, and they decided to go to India to see what they could do to help. So 5 days after that tsunami hit, I went to India. And while I was there, I went to a leprosy colony. And I had this incredibly profound experience where I mean, a leprosy colony, you can't even believe a place like that exists on the planet in this day and age, you know? Like, I drove up there, I remember, in a van, and I got out of the van, and all I wanted to do was turn around and get back in the van because it was just disgusting. I mean, it was like people just sitting there with open wounds, and I mean, there's human excrement and flies, and it was just this, it was so disgusting. People were just so disfigured, and it was like I literally walked into hell. Yeah. And so I was turning around to get back into the van, and I caught the eye of this sweet woman that was sitting against a tree. She was probably 80 pounds. Her name was Saral. She just didn't have any hands left, but I sort of went over there and talked to her. And I just remember in that moment of making eye contact with her, just seeing a woman, you know, like a person, just like me, that just by accident of birth, she was born there and I was born here. And anyway, she told me her story, and we started talking, and she was telling me how she'd been forced to leave her home and her family because she'd contracted leprosy, and she'd been a beggar for the last 20 years. And at one point, I just, like, put my hand on her shoulder, you know, just, like, in this gesture of compassion. It was such a natural, you would have done the exact same thing. It was this natural gesture of, like, I am so sorry this happened to you, you know? And the look on her face when I touched her was visceral because in India, she was literally untouchable. You know, she was considered to be less than a human. And so for me to look in her eyes and touch her on her shoulder and say, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you had this horrible thing happen to you, that was so impactful for her because I treated her like a human person. Yeah. And it was a life-changing moment for me because all of a sudden my stupid convertible and everything that was happening in Silicon Valley didn't matter because I'd found this way that I could fulfill this nurturing desire that I had in a way that also I was able to use the skills that I just learned from Steve. So I just thought, like, you know what? I know how to engage people around a common cause now. I can do this. I can help her. I can move here and I can help her. So I went home and quit my job, and 6 weeks later moved back to India and lived there for the next 7 years, as one normally does. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it was people told me I was crazy to do it, and I'm not sure that I would have signed up for it had I known it would have been 7 years.
Yeah.
But I will say this, that those years in India were the happiest years of my life, or among the happiest years of my life. And I did it because I was listening to the Spirit, and that's what I was supposed to do at that moment. Wow. And so I feel like if there's anything that my life has taught me is that, yes, listen to the smart people around you, learn from the people that are wise, but at the end of the day, the thing that matters most is that you can hear the Lord and that you're willing to do what he tells you to do, even if it's insane things like move to leprosy colonies in India.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is That is quite a story. And I'm sure you must have had incredible experiences during those 7 years. And I love what you said about how you followed the Spirit in your career path. And I don't know how often we think about it in that way, because we are so driven sometimes by, dollars and cents and, different things, and not necessarily like purpose.
Totally.
And I've always sensed when I'm around you, you're a very purpose-driven person. And I think a lot of us in our early stages of our careers seek that purpose in our careers. We're just like, where do I find it? How can I do it? How would you say you've found that purpose? And what are some keys, what are some pointers you could give to say, hey, you feel like you don't have purpose? Go this way, or like look here. Or how would you describe that?
Well, first of all, I think I think that we've done sort of a disservice to your generation in particular by saying to you guys all the time, like, find your purpose in life. Like, what's your passion? Find it and pursue it. The truth is, I think that finding our purpose is never a one-time event. I think it's literally the work of our lives. We do it over and over and over again. I mean, at that point in my life, my purpose was to help the leprosy-affected people in India. Yeah. Right now, my purpose is, to help teenagers come to Christ and get excited about the restored gospel. But truthfully, next year, I may have a different purpose, know? And I think that, like, getting hung up on, like, what is my purpose in life? And seriously just trying so hard to dig in and find that one thing. I think that if your purpose in life is solely to listen to the Spirit tell you what's next and then to go with what feels right in that moment, you actually don't need to know what's going to happen 2 years from now, or at least I don't. If it feels right to study IT right now. You have no idea what that's going to be in 6 years. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be coding in 6 years. It could be you're living in like Cambodia, building schools or whatever. Because truthfully, like that IT skill that you're learning now is something that the Lord could use and something that you have no idea about right now. Yeah. So I do think finding our purpose is an important thing to do, but I just think you have to continually do the work over and over to make sure that it's still your purpose.
That is such a good insight, because I think it's so tempting to be like I need to know the answer for the whole life, my whole lifetime. I need to
so
find
stressful.
it. Yeah, it is.
Totally. I just don't think that's how he works. I bet you. I don't know for sure, obviously, but I bet you if you talk to most of the successful people that we idolize or that we admire, they'll tell you that they're in a place that they didn't necessarily anticipate being. Right. So
that's what happened to you.
Well, certainly my life has been different than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. But that is so fabulous. Okay, so I kind of wanted to dive into like what in these different experiences you've had, kind of things you've learned about yourself. Like, because I'm sure as you go into these, you don't realize what you're going to learn at the end or who you're going to become at the end. Like, what even now at HEFY, what do you feel like you're learning about yourself?
Well, I think you learn hard lessons, and I think you learn really touching, important lessons. Like, I think that I've learned a lot about how to be a better leader. I'm not sure that I'm a perfect leader. I know for sure I'm not a perfect leader, but I think when I started out as a leader, it was really, really important to me that everybody liked me. Yeah. And so I was super nice to everybody and completely easygoing, and just everybody did like me, but we got nothing done. And so I think after that, I pendulum swung all the way to the other side, where I was pretty awful to work for. I was mean and like hard, and I would get upset with people if they didn't do things exactly the way that I wanted them to. And we got a lot done, but everybody was miserable. And so I think it's taken me, frankly, a lot of years of leadership to sort of, and I'm still working on it all the time, but really I think I've gotten much better at finding that middle ground where as a leader I hold people to high expectations because we're doing this really fun, amazing, world-class thing together. Yeah. But I also value you as a human being and recognize that we're all fallible and that we're going to all try to help each other along on that system. And so I guess to answer your question, I think that was one example of leadership that I've learned, but I could tell you that in a lot of different aspects of my life. Just doing things wrong a lot until you learn how to do it right, and learning to be okay with that process.
Yeah.
Like not sort of defining myself as a bad leader because I haven't gotten it right yet.
Sure.
You know?
That's such a, like having a growth mindset with your
Totally.
leadership.
Yes. No, I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to ask a question. We often get feedback from our listeners about things they'd like to know about, things they'd like to learn from our guests. And we've had a series of amazing women join us on the show.
Cool.
And you're
That's awesome.
another. And we're so grateful. And we just would really love to know what your advice would be. And this is something, obviously, I don't even know if it's appropriate for me to ask this question, but I think it is, because we should all be involved in this cause of equality and in the workplace.
Oh, I love that you're talking about it.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's so important. And
Absolutely.
I think you are a huge role model for so many women to see, okay, this is kind of life I can have. What would you say to those women who need advice about how to have success in their careers, and like how would you describe that experience you've had?
I think there's sort of two answers to that question. I think as women who come from our faith, as members of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, I feel like unintentionally we may have been taught that either we're wives and mothers or we're failures. That either you're a wife and a mother now, or just don't worry, you can just sit the bench for the next 80 years and then you'll have a family.
Yeah.
Like that's some sort of consolation.
What?
Like, what? I just don't think that's how God works. I think he sent us here for a purpose. And I think that we're righteous women who are living the gospel for the most part. I think every single one of us would love to be married in the temple and have families. But I know that for a lot of women like me, that hasn't happened the way that we would have loved for it to have happened. And what I've learned is that that's not a mistake. Like, God did not send me here for 80 years to sit the bench. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Totally.
I'm so excited to be a wife and a mother. I'm so stoked that that's part of my future. But man, I am here for a purpose, and I'm becoming the woman that I was created eternally to become. And if that means I spend some time in leprosy colonies, or if I spend some time in Apple, and if that means that every single day when I go outside, I get to look at someone and make them feel like a human being because I know what it feels like not to be, that's exactly the way it's supposed to happen. I refuse to sit at home and be sad. He's given me this life, and I'm becoming this amazing person that I will be in 10,000 years as I kind of work through the challenges of being an imperfect person now, you know? So that's what I would say to a lot of women who are struggling and feeling sad because their life doesn't look exactly the way they thought it would. Like, get off the bench, man.
Right.
Go do something. You're here for a purpose, and there's so many people who need you right now.
And men, I mean, that advice applies
You're
just
right.
as much.
It applies to everyone.
You know,
You're
so
totally
anyone
right.
who's in that situation, you know, that's such profound advice.
Yeah. And then to be successful in your career, I would say to women, don't be afraid to use your voice. You have an incredible ability to articulate things in ways that are profound and needed and important. And if you're in a culture where it's less habitual for women's voices to be heard, be the one to change that, because you will improve the culture of the place where you're at. And if other people try to shut that down, don't let them. You speak up just as much as you need to.
Yeah.
And own that capacity that you have to make an impact.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. I wanted to make sure you were able to share about that because I knew you would have good
had some thoughts.
experiences. Yeah, obviously. Okay, so in our last few minutes, we always ask our guests the same question. Our show is called Measuring Success Right. We really believe in the show that not only is it important to know what success is, it's important to define it for yourself. And every one of our guests has kind of defined it differently. And we love to ask our guests, you know, how do you measure success in your life? So for you, Amy, like, what does success mean?
Yeah. It's funny, Clayton Christensen was my teacher at grad school, and he wrote the book about how do you measure success, and so he would always ask us this question, and ask us to think about it for ourselves. It was interesting to think about it with my Harvard classmates and see how they defined success in different ways, and to think about whether or not I also felt that same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways I do feel like being world-class, being excellent at all of the things of this world is important. I think if you're in school, man, do the work to get A's. If you're in a job, like, do the work to be the best at your job, to be indispensable. Mm-hmm. I think that is a really important part of being a successful person. Mm-hmm. But personally for me, I think the answer looks a little bit like a picture of a woman early in the morning, like on a Tuesday morning, with the light just coming in, reading her scriptures and being taught by the Lord about who she is and what she's capable of doing. Mm-hmm. If that's what my life looks like every single day for the rest of my life, it doesn't matter what anybody else around me says or does. Like, that's my Father talking to me about who I am and what I can do. Mm-hmm. And then I know I'm okay. Yeah. And I think that at the end of the day, if I'm 95 years old and that's what that looks like, then I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And I love the way you let your faith just shine in the way you talk and in the way you describe your life and even your work and your career. That's one of the special things I love being at BYU, is that we can just have that conversation. And so thank you for sharing your experiences, your testimony, your character with us for
thanks, Hunter.
last
It's so
few
good to
minutes.
see you again.
It's so good to see you too.
I just feel so much love just seeing you again.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks.
I'm so grateful for what you did for me while I was working for HEFY, and it was the best experience. And wish you the best in the coming months as you prepare another, how many trips, you say?
166 this summer.
166 trips across the world.
We're pretty busy.
Good luck with that.
Thanks.
And we can't wait to hear more and what's coming in your life.
Well, thank you. Good luck to you, too. I think this is so cool what you're doing. However I can support, I'd love to do that.
Thank you, Amy. So this has been Hunter Muse with Measuring Success Right with Amy Antonelli. Thanks for listening and joining us today. Make sure you subscribe to our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. Be a friend and tell a friend about Measuring Success Right.
This podcast is a project of the Marriott Student Review at Brigham Young University. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Marriott Student Review or online at marriottstudentreview.org.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect official policy or position of Brigham Young University or The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.